I know my friend from Kentucky, Mr. Massey, will probably expand on this later, but your uncle, Senator Ted Kennedy, was a pretty strong opponent of sweeping immunity from liability for manufacturers of vaccines. And did he not introduce an amendment to repeal the so-called PrEP Act, the Public Readiness and Emergency Preparedness Act, when he was a senator?
Yes, he did. And, that immunity, which was passed in 1986, neither the Republicans or Democrats wanted it. Ronald Reagan at that time, who signed the bill, and Wyeth was the company that was pushing it, and they were saying that they were losing $20 in downstream liabilities for every dollar that they made in profits from vaccines. They were going to get out of the business if they were not granted immunity. Ronald Reagan said to them at that time, "Why don't you make the vaccines safe?" And Wyeth said, "Because they're unavoidably unsafe," which is true of most medicines. I'm not anti-vaccine, but I think we need to be honest and we need to have good science. That's all I've ever argued.
In closing out my time here, I would just say this. My father had polio. I understand the ravages of that disease. I'm grateful that we have the opportunity to have a polio vaccine, but I also want the truth being sought. I want to know the health impacts of the polio vaccine going forward and every other vaccine that's being administered. And I'll just close by saying and asking, I know that this is informed by a great deal of conversations you've had with mothers and moms who came up to you, and if you could expand on that, I'll get back.
Yeah, I was dragged kicking and screaming into this space because I was confronted by, when I was touring the country on suing companies about mercury and fish. And by the way, people, I spent 30 years trying to get mercury out of the fish in this country, and nobody ever called me anti-fish. But at that time, we were trying to get mercury out of vaccines. These mothers were coming and saying, "My child was injured by the vaccine." These were many, many hundreds, literally, of mothers with intellectual disabilities. And they said, "Nobody's listening to us. The Democrats aren't listening to us. The Republicans aren't listening to us." And I felt like I should listen to them and actually read the science. And that is what got me down into the time. And by the way, it's the worst career decision I have ever made.
Time of the gentleman.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. You'll back.
Time of the gentleman inspired. The gentleman from California is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman and Ranking Member Plaskett. During the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, anti-Asian hate and violence skyrocketed as some racists blamed a virus coming out of China on all Asian Americans. Since March of 2020, Stop AAPI Hate, a nonprofit organization aimed at tracking and addressing anti-Asian hate, reported more than 11,000 anti-Asian acts of hate and violence. This same report found that 49% of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders have experienced some form of discrimination. These acts of hate include Asian Americans being beaten, spit on, screamed at, and even killed. And the increases in these types of attacks during COVID accompanied a slew of anti-Chinese sentiments related to the virus, like calling it the quote-unquote China virus and even disgustingly quote-unquote Kung flu. Many Asian Americans were harassed, physically accosted, and told that they quote-unquote created the virus. Yet one of our Republican witnesses encourages this appalling rhetoric and promotes anti-Asian hate with dangerous and unfounded claims. Just last week, Mr. Kennedy suggested COVID-19 was a bioweapon and said it was, quote, targeted to attack Caucasians and black people, end quote, and that, quote, the people who are most immune are Ashkenazi Jews and Chinese, end quote, suggesting that the Chinese people didn't suffer like others during the pandemic. Despite asserting that he should become their president, Mr. Kennedy seems to disregard the correlation between anti-Asian rhetoric and violence. Ms. Wiley, do you frequently work with minority communities, including Chinese American or other Asian American communities?
I do.
And do you think Mr. Kennedy's theory is racist?
I think that Mr. Kennedy's statements fuels the theories that suggest that there's a biology to race and that therefore we can actually identify people in communities as possibly either being benefited by or being people who are not sharing the same interests and needs as the rest of us. And yes, that has served to drive hate and bias, and sadly, including violent incidents.
Now, it was said earlier in this hearing that Mr. Kennedy is a smart man. Now, so far as I know, he does not have any specific education or training in medicine. He is not an epidemiologist, one who studies infectious diseases. He He has never conducted clinical trials in a professional setting. He has never done scientific research in a professional laboratory and published scientific findings in a peer-reviewed publication. Ms. Wiley, what kind of harm does someone with absolutely no medical training or knowledge do when they espouse unfounded anti-Asian vaccine theories during a fraught time like COVID?
One of the things that happened in this historic pandemic was that there was certainly a need to get on top of very quickly what the science said. I am not a scientist either. And so what social media platforms did was go and speak to government agencies because their own policies, their own user agreements required them to look at and figure out what the facts were so that they could assess what was responsible and what was not responsible to post. I say that because it was incredibly important to ensure that people were getting real-time information as possible, but also ones that really demonstrated what all of us need, rather than where and how we should ascribe blame, or where and how we should consider who benefits and who doesn't, because we were all harmed. But I say this in part because it was the social media platforms themselves that reached out to government agencies, including Health and Human Services and CDC, to get that information. And under the vacated opinion, which is really important to understand, it has been vacated by the Fifth Circuit, this preliminary injunction on all these incidents we're talking about, because one of the things it would do, in my view, just as in my legal view, is that it was actually saying that the government could not respond to such requests under this injunction, which is incredibly overbroad, dangerous, and doesn't allow government agencies to do what they are chartered to do.
Now, I'm an attorney by training, and one of the things I learned very early on in constitutional law is that no right given to the people of the United States is absolute, and that includes the right to free speech, because you do not have the right to shout fire in a crowded theater, because it could produce harm and death of people by being false. These social media platforms have user policies to try to prevent that kind of harm. Is that not correct, Ms. Wiley?
That is correct.
And so we are not trying to censor speech. We are simply trying to create factually correct information to prevent harm to people, including death. And that's what they were trying to do during COVID. Is that not correct?
Legally speaking, absolutely. And I say that as a matter of law, which is that court cases say that the government has in fact, it's its role to ask for compliance with policies. The policies on the books of social media platforms were violated, and they said
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, but the last questioner got an additional extra minute. I'm at 35 seconds over. I would
Point of
just
order,
ask that
Mr.
you
Chairman.
be
The
able to
Democrat
finish-
beforehand got an extra
finish
minute.
her sentence.
Trying to be generous.
Finish her
Trying to be
sentence.
generous, even when the response is that the government determines the truth.
I would like for her to be able to finish her sentence, Mr. Chairman, then I will yield back.
Okay, Ms. Wiley, you can finish your sentence.
Thank you.
I'm not sure I remember the sentence, but thank you.
Okay.
I just think the
I
point
do.
was, it was.
I do. You were saying
there's
the
a
government should be the arbiter
Can
of
you
what's
please
true.
not put words into the mouth of the witness and let her respond? It's
Chair now
her
recognizes the
answer.
gentlelady from New York, the gentlelady from California.
I love how you
Senator
follow the rules,
Time
Mr.
is-
Chairman.
time is-
It's really indicative of
time
what a
is
kangaroo
up.
court this is and
Censorship,
what a
it's
circus it
censorship
is.
by the chair, it's censorship by the chair.
Lord.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Morris, isn't it true that your October 2020 Hunter Biden laptop from Hell story has proven to be 100% factually accurate?
Did you know that you can started talking about this and the way they've chosen to release information to the media, and in some cases I think very fascinating how he has laid out the facts as he knew them, withheld some of the things he may have known until the reporter asked a certain question. But I found it very fascinating, and it's worth noting that there are district attorneys in Jefferson County. There's a cutoff district in Jefferson County that works with the Bessemer area. She was probably, I would guess, probably 5 to 7 miles from that area. The district attorney there has, obviously, as he noted, the discretion here on whether or not to charge Carly Russell. I heard Nick Durza say that He will announce charges if and when they are filed. It's anybody's guess right now whether or not that will happen, but I was glad to hear a reporter ask the question that I've personally been wondering: how much did this cost?
Yeah.
What resources were expended? Because you think about, I believe last week he said they had to fly a helicopter, they had drone teams, surely detectives working overtime. I'm guessing this will be a figure when you total up all the agencies, all the personnel, and all the equipment. I mean, it costs minimum $1,000 an hour to fly a helicopter anywhere.
Jack, this. There's nothing right. There's nothing that is funny about this. The word hoax has been tossed about. There's nothing funny about this
For anybody.
or anybody.
No.
There's no games that should be played when it comes to missing persons cases. I shared this on stream. Can you think of what it must have been like for a parent of an actual missing person to see this case get so much media attention and then find out that it was not true, that the story that was told that was just not true?
And why did it get media attention? It's because often there is criticism of the media, I'm using that term very loosely, that we don't cover missing persons cases enough. Obviously that's something you have championed and made a huge difference in, and our audience has made a huge difference in on WFLA Now. But I thought about the detectives who must have been putting aside other work they are doing, because just as every police department across the country is, they are stretched thin some weeks in their communities with what they have to investigate, what they have to, they always say, we hear the term, oh, it's an ongoing investigation. That's not a throwaway line. If anybody out there is in law enforcement, you know that these things take weeks and weeks and really running to ground quite a bit of information. And all of the information that was available here, you're showing some of this 911 call right now. I'm just thinking about all of the people, but also aside from the dollar amount, aside from the investigators who had to maybe leave other assignments to go pursue this, all of the volunteers. My fiance is a news anchor at the Next Star station in Birmingham, Alabama, and so I was up there visiting her the weekend this was all going on. And I'm watching their local news, seeing all these volunteers who've come out, and they're walking along the interstate, they're looking through the woods, and the whole time I'm thinking, that is not an easy place to search for someone. I don't know if you're familiar with, I know you worked in Alabama, not in Birmingham.
Yeah, and I share with our audience, I've driven on I-459 a couple of times, but not enough to say, oh, I know this exit.
Right.
Familiar with the area.
The spot where she is heavily wooded on both sides of the interstate. The side where she was parked, to my knowledge, where she was, it's just woods. And when I heard Nick Durz's last week describing, she says there was a fence and then a truck, I'm thinking, where would there be a semi-truck?
In a neighborhood.
Where would there be no witnesses to such a thing? Where is this chain link fence, or however he described it last week? And it started to, I'm starting to think, I don't know how this is even possible if I was going to perpetrate such a horrible crime. I don't know how I would do it in that location. But I was watching the news, seeing all these volunteers who came out to search for this person, and I just hope through all this, and this is really what I wanted to say, I hope people don't lose faith in the efforts to make headway on so many cases that need attention because of this. I hope this doesn't diminish that.
I can speak for the people that I know that have watched the WFLA Now streams for a long time.
Yeah. That
there's just such a tremendous amount of goodwill in the social media community that focuses on missing persons cases. I don't think that's going to deter any of that. It's just frustrating for those who have loved ones who are missing.
Mm-hmm.
This is a case that received, and it stems from a woman sounding as if she's trying to do the right thing. Toddler, side of the road, middle of the night, an interstate in central Alabama, my goodness, trying to call 911, hears a scream. All of these details makes you think, oh my goodness, this is such a goodwill, such a story of goodwill that all of a sudden takes this, evil turn. Who would do something like this? And then to find out that this didn't happen, it's going to be frustrating for people watching. It's going to be frustrating for I would imagine, for Carlee Russell's family, for the neighbors, for the community, because again, we just don't have a definitive answer as to why. Why would you do something like this? It's an actual question that I'm throwing out there. Why would somebody want to do this? Is it to hear your name on social media platforms? Is it for are you trying to achieve social media fame? Is there something? I mean, she again going back to her Google search history, Jack. She's looking up the movie Taken. Is there something
Right.
that I mean, we don't want to go down the speculative rabbit hole too deep, but what eludes us in this case up until this point is motive. We don't know why she would do something like that.
No, and what is going to be so fascinating to watch, the district attorney in Jefferson County is a man named Danny Carr, and there have been incidences, and, you know, as we've seen with some prosecutors in big cities, they've taken an initiative not to prosecute, you know, certain things that they don't feel are worthy of maybe the resources. You know, a lot of district attorneys get to have the prerogative ultimately on whether or not you charge somebody. Many legal experts would say this and would agree with me that it is not hard to get an indictment in this country, in this legal system, if you choose to do so. And certainly there is now a mountain of evidence, and it sounds like her attorney, Emory Anthony, who's a very well-known criminal defense attorney in Birmingham, Alabama, he generally, in my experience covering him, represented violent criminals and violent offenders. So I found it fascinating that, you know, I didn't hear a defense of any kind in that statement. It was an admission.
Let's really quickly, what we're gonna do, because we heard it once, but I think it's really important now to hear the words in the statement and what was actually, we're going to play it back for you. But again, as a reminder, these words coming up are from Emory Anthony, the statement that was provided from Carly Russell's attorney. And again, context, she was going to be meeting with police, with investigators today, and then backs out of that to provide a written statement instead. And this is what that written statement was back in 90 seconds on WFLA.
No kidnapping on Thursday, July 13th, 2023. My client did not see a baby on the side of the road. My client did not leave the Hoover area when she was identified as a missing person. My client did not have any help in this incident, but this was a single act done by herself. My client was not with anyone or any hotel with anyone during the time she was missing. My client apologizes for her actions to this community, the volunteers who were searching for her, to the Hoover Police Department and other agencies as well, as to her friends and family. We ask for your prayers for Carly as she addresses her issues and attempts to move forward, understanding that she made a mistake in this matter. Carly, again, asks for your forgiveness and prayers. We have a meeting scheduled with Mr. Anthony to further discuss this case. We're currently in discussions with the Jefferson County District Attorney's Office in Bessemer about possible criminal charges related to this case, and we will announce those charges when and if they are filed.
All right, and that is the statement that was provided. Just again, through Emory Anthony, the attorney. By the way, while we're talking about Emory Anthony, I was covering news in Mobile, you covered news in Birmingham, you know the area extremely well. Any reason why that attorney would be brought on in this case?
I could rattle off 3 people that you would want to retain if you were in a situation like this.
It's not a major metropolitan area, so it's not as if there's just you know,
This is in New York City, and Emory Anthony is experienced. Again, I can't think of a case that of a certain variety in terms of violent offenders that he was not involved in. I mean, you know how it is. You cover these things. There are other attorneys who I talk to often who represent, you know, I can almost point at a case and go, well, I know who they're going to call. Or in some cases, I know the attorney's going to call them and say, let me take your case. I wouldn't read too much into the thought that this meeting scheduled for today was canceled, because I don't know a defense attorney who has a client who at this point especially would say, well, sure, just go get interrogated. So I would say it's a very wise thing that if you have a client, you're gonna make an admission or at least provide a statement and then say, we will meet with you or I will meet with you. But Emory Anthony is a very respected criminal defense lawyer. Read into that what you will in terms of why that person is now representing this client. But to hear that there was a meeting scheduled and then
It
backed
makes
out on. It makes sense.
It makes perfect sense.
Sure.
This is somebody who has just admitted to a major mistake, what she calls a major mistake in judgment, by saying that an abduction took place when in reality it didn't. It's unpredictable behavior. What she could say in a Q&A with investigators could, look, there's potential criminal charges looming here in this case. That's a whole other component to this story. But look, as we have a large audience here, and we know that our audience, of course, here for the press conference and then here for the post-stream coverage or post-press conference coverage, let me just deliver this for a moment. Use this as an opportunity to find missing persons cases that are genuine, that really do need your shares, really do need your retweets. I did this on Twitter this past week where I said, hey, look, just give me as many cases as you can.
I saw that, yeah.
Let's retweet as many as we can. Let's not let this be the taste in our mouths, so to speak, in regards to missing persons cases, because there are so many out there that need our help. So while I have a platform here to share that, I think it's really important that we encourage people. Missing persons cases, it's a real massive problem in this country. People go missing every single day. And so many of those cases, they are just so complex with so much unknown that they don't get this amount of law enforcement attention. They just don't get this amount of law enforcement focus. And those cases, many, they deserve it. They deserve what Carlee Russell received and ultimately didn't need in this case. Where was Carlee?
Who knows? Listen,
She says that she says in the statement that she wasn't with anybody.
I won't. I don't know